Welcome back, everybody. Part of working towards social justice and equality is holding our city leaders accountable. 3 News Now anchor Maya Sign sat down with a candid conversation with Omaha Police Chief Todd Schmaderer to discuss the state of local policing after a year of protests and calls for change.
Anger, disappointment, desperation. Nearly a year ago, people took to the streets demanding change after another black man, George Floyd, was killed by a police officer in Minneapolis. Omaha Police Chief Todd Schmaderer, who's been chief since 2012, sat down with me and said he's proud of how OPD handles its police-community relations, even prior to last summer.
And we had a number of successes leading up to, but even before the protests, with the reduction in violent crime, reduction in homicides, the increase in clearing homicides, all indicators of good police-community relations.
And pleased with how his 900-officer department dealt with the protests.
And I'm very proud of how the Omaha Police Department stepped up to ensure First Amendment rights were adhered to and to protect the city when it got to a point where there was some unrest.
But he says even his department has things to learn.
We heard very loudly, especially the very peaceful protests that we had in North Omaha. We really heard those voices quite a bit. Even though we may feel that we've made some progress, is that really resonating, and is that being measured by the community as progress?
Schmaderer said the department utilized the moment to improve some of their policies in efforts to minimize any deaths that occur with police intervention. Immediately after the civil unrest, the department implemented several internal policies.
The duty to intervene. If an officer is doing something wrong, you now must intervene. We always taught it, but it's now officially in policy. We went ahead and banned chokeholds. Wasn't something we taught, but we wanted to outright ban it. Also, we banned any neck pins with the knee in response to the Derek Chauvin incident in Minneapolis.
I asked Schmaderer if the department implemented the improvements that were recommended to the department by the Safety Review Board. They included verbal commands prior to pepperball deployment, documenting reports, for officers to wear large name tags or serial numbers on their helmets and uniforms to help identify officers, and more professionalism while handling the arrest of agitators. Schmaderer said all those have been implemented. In order to do that, Schmaderer says the department had to go through over 1,000 hours of protest footage in order to study what went right and what went wrong.
At the end of that complete analysis, which was exhaustive and spanned months and months and months, we did find the need to implement those that you just mentioned. And we've also adjusted some of our tactics because we've learned what has worked and what doesn't work.
What they found didn't work was the inability for officers to communicate with such large crowds.
They didn't know what the progression of events were because we didn't have a loudspeaker big enough to reach them. So that was of great concern to me. It really was, because there was a lot of misunderstanding associated with that for good reason. They couldn't hear. So we did purchase a very top-of-the-line speaker, if you will. So the next time, if we're ever faced with that again, we'll be able to talk to everybody for blocks.
Some people who were arrested during the protest were also able to complete a restorative justice program that would allow them to avoid criminal conviction for protest-related offenses. Chief Schmaderer says he's working to grow that program.
And every arrest that we make does not have to end up in a jail sentence. There's a remedy and a mediation in place that I think that can reduce that offense off that person's record, which is good for them.
Schmaderer says this past year was also tough on his officers and department culture.
It was hard on them in the aftermath of the Minneapolis incident because we had thought that was wrong, and we knew it was wrong. We thought it was a crime from the start. We thought it was deplorable.
In the past year, the Omaha Police Department has seen an increase in officers retiring early or leaving law enforcement altogether. A year later, progress made. But still, Schmaderer recognizes there's still a need for Omaha to move forward.
I've got a great team. I've got super officers, and we have super partners in this community. So the Omaha Police Department, we're not perfect, but we try to be as honest as possible, and we try to do the right thing for this community.